Well, it is time to start Lunch with Leaders, and as you can see, we have a whole crop of outstanding leaders. And so, right from the very beginning, I would like for you to welcome them to Leaders with Vision. I have one brief announcement to make before we commence with our program. Next month, of course, the legislature will have started at our normal time, and due to legislative and caucus conflicts, Lunch with Leaders will be held on Tuesday the 18th. So you are invited to watch for notices on this. It has already been squared with the restaurant here. We will be in the ballroom next door, and it will be on retirement plans, public retirement plans. So if that is something that you have an interest in, please mark your calendars. We're going to be 2 days early on Tuesday, the March 18th. Same place, but next door. All of you have had the opportunity to pick up the bios of our 6 presenters. And in case you didn't see them picking it out, they chose their position by lot. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first presenter, who has been a great assistant to Louisiana and is a native of Louisiana, and my friend, General Russel Honore.
Well, it's an honor to be here today. I appreciate that citizens come together and talk about things that are listed here on this chart, that to make this a better place to live, not only for us today, but for the future of Baton Rouge. We have many challenges, but on the other side of those challenges are a lot of opportunities. We've got to stop the drain of people leaving Louisiana. They graduate, you send them to college for free, and they leave the state. We got to find ways, these are your kids and grandkids, how we get them to stay in Louisiana. One of them is creating an environment that they want to stay in. And one of the things that I'm working on with the Green Army is a commitment to make sure we protect our air. We have clean air, we have safe water, and we have safe food. And all of those are tied to each other, because we're in an environment where we're in a business boom. With that business boom comes certain risks. Like all of you, I realize the products that these companies create jobs, and they're good for the nation. I came here because I had gas in my tank and oil in my engine. Until one of these kids figure out another way to power a car, that's the way it's going to be for the near future. And Louisiana provides much of that energy for the nation. But that comes with a cost. And the biggest threat right now is to our water, because water could also affect our food. And we want to make sure that we have standards in Louisiana, that we are protecting our water. And that's why I formed the Green Army, to work with other environmental organizations to ensure that Louisiana, every person in Louisiana has a human right to clean air, clean water, and safe food. You can bring the jobs, but you don't have a right to trash the place. And right now we sit here with 6,000 abandoned wells in Louisiana that we know about, that need to be repaired. 6,000. The legislature call them orphan wells. They're not orphan. Somebody left them, and the legislature allowed this to happen. We got a lot of work to do, and it's going to be through the legislation that we got to get it done. We've got to do better. This business is good to the state. Our blessing in Louisiana is our natural resources. We're 4th in the nation. That means we ought to be 4th in the economy. We ought to have the best 4th-ranked school system. We ought to have the 4th-ranked hospital system. We ought to have the 4th best roads in the nation. But in essence, we're in the end of all of those lists. We're in the last 4 of all of those, because we have not managed these resources well. And going to the future, I want my kids to be able to drink this water that the Baton Rouge Water Company draw out the ground. I don't want to drink Mississippi River water. And that's one of the issues we'll talk about today and discuss, because everything has to have a balance to it. And we've got to figure our way out of this, because if we don't, we are the witnesses. We know how we got to where we are. We are that transition generation. We've got an early 19th century process operating in the 21st century. We don't even have a loop around this town. You can't get in it, you can't get out. Okay? This has to change. You want to keep your kids here? Create decent roads. You ought not walk outside and smell something and say, somebody say, what is that? Oh, don't worry about it. We've said that for too many generations. Don't worry about it. Thank you very much. It's good to be here with you today.
Thank you, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce another good friend of mine, Gene Owens of the Baton Rouge Water Company.
We appreciate the opportunity of being here today, too. And I want to tell you 3 ways in which the Baton Rouge Water Company is doing our best to preserve for the future generations the heritage that we all enjoy today, and that is good, clean, pure water that is among the best in the United States. We are pursuing a process of partial remediation and interception by building some interceptor wells that will intercept the saltwater plume as it threatens one station, the Lula station, which is the center of our production in the 1,500-foot sand. The Lula station and its connected 1,700-foot sand accounts for about 1/4 of the Baton Rouge Water Company's total production. We are building these scavenger wells that will intercept and remove that salt water as it's coming across the fault in that particular sand at about the same rate that it is infiltrating across the Baton Rouge fault. If it works, and we believe that this will be placed into service sometime within the next 6 or 7 days, if it works, we will have preserved that station for 25 to 50 years. It's not a total remediation of the saltwater intrusion problem, even in the 1,500-foot sand, but it is a big step, and it is a vital step insofar as the public supply here in Baton Rouge is concerned. The second thing we've done is to co-sponsor a conservation program that emphasizes the importance of water, and co-sponsoring it. This is a program that you may have seen, called WaterWise Baton Rouge, and this is a program that is designed to place uppermost in people's minds the importance of water and the possibility of conserving water. Not entirely for this reason, but we also have another element to our conservation program, which is that we had petitioned about 6 years ago a change in the structure of our rates and charges that we charge for water. And our rate schedule was a steeply declining rate schedule. We now have eliminated some of the steepness of that, because in that way we are not encouraging just profligate use of water beyond what is really needed. And for whatever the reasons, the conservation program and this change in our rate structure together, we have eliminated the use of water, or reduced the use of water more accurately, by about 4% per customer per month. And this shows up and has shown up steadily for about the last 2 years. And so a conservation program is effective, even though we are continuing to supply all of the water that anyone requests, and Baton Rouge has begun to resume its rate of growth. The third thing we're doing is to diversify our sources of water to spread the load among the 10 aquifers or sands that are available in Baton Rouge. And we attempt to drill a new well in the sand that will have the least impact, if the sand is suitable, will have the least impact on the aquifer. These three things, interception and remediation, conservation, and diversification, mark the hallmark of a program that is just emerging, and I hope it will be successful. We certainly need for it to be successful. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tony. Now, Tony, I told you, I don't speak him. Duplechin.
Very good.
Who is with the Baton Rouge Capital Area Groundwater Commission. He's the director. Tony, welcome.
Thank you, Gene. Good afternoon. As Gene said, I'm director of the Capital Area Groundwater Conservation District, and we also have a commission that oversees the operations of the district. The district is made up of 5 parishes around Capital Area, Baton Rouge. Those are East and West Baton Rouge, East and West Feliciana, and Point Coupee parishes. There are 15 members that make up the commission. Those are 1 member from each parish. 3 members represent industry. 3 members represent public supply. 1 member represents, in this case, current member is the Louisiana Farm Bureau. That's 5 and 6, 11. 2 people from state government, 1 from DEQ and 1 from the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, Office of Conservation. And then the last member is someone who is chosen by the other 14 members to be an at-large member. As it turns out right now, our at-large member is a retiree from the U.S. Geological Survey here in Baton Rouge, a hydrologist. The function of the district and the commission is to promote the orderly development of groundwater resources in the capital area and to protect the quality of these resources. Now, we have done, the commission has done a number of things since it came into being in 1974. I've only been there for the last 3 years, but I have been involved with their workings from the outside pretty much since they were created. I used to work for USGS, as you can see on my biography. But the commission has passed several resolutions to try and protect the groundwater in the capital area. One of them reserves the 1,000-foot, 1,500-foot, and 1,700-foot sands for public supply use only. If you were to look at a cross-section, and I had some slides, but I think that would kind of detract from everyone paying attention. If there are 10 sands, as Mr. Owen said, that are used, these 3 sands are used almost primarily for public supply. We have also put restrictions on the 2,000-foot sand, which goes for a little bit of public supply, but mainly for industrial uses. We work with the U.S. Geological Survey. They recently delivered to us a computer model on the 2,000-foot sand that showed saltwater movement in the sand and the water level changes in that sand. Like I said, that one's primarily for industry. They're currently working on the rest of the sands. We have a 10-year project with them. Cooperators in this project are Department of Transportation and Development, Parish and City of Baton Rouge, and the USGS themselves all cooperate on this project. And we're not going to wait till the end of the 10 years to see something to do. We'll be getting reports periodically from them, and hopefully year by year, we'll have a solid plan to put forth on the different sands. Now, the main two sands, like I said, are the 1,500-foot sand and the 2,000-foot sand. In the 2,000-foot sand, we have met with industry and proposed, and they've accepted some further limitations on the amount of water they're pumping. If you look at a map showing where the salt water is coming across the fault, you'll see two different plumes of salt water, one in the 2,000-foot sand, one in the 1,500-foot sand. Well, the one in the 2,000-foot sand is heading towards what we call the industrial district along the river. Okay? The other plume is headed straight for the wells Mr. Owen spoke about a little bit earlier at Lula Street Station. And he's already said they have put in a scavenger well to try and pull the salt water out before it gets to those wells and extend the life of those wells. East Baton Rouge Parish is big. It's 471 square miles. And the area where we're having problems with saltwater intrusion is maybe 10 square miles, 15 square miles. So we're not running out of water, but we have to look at what our options are throughout the rest of the parish. Thank you.
And I hope we will become friends.
I'm sorry?
And I said, I hope we become friends with these other guys. Our next guest is Henry Graham, whom I have known for many, many years at the Louisiana Chemical Association, and a good friend. Henry, come on up.
I feel this is an important topic for us to discuss because sustainability may mean different things to different people. Does it mean maintaining the status quo, just prolonging what you have? Does it mean improving the status quo? Or does it mean, in some cases, recognizing that you can't maintain what you currently have? When we look at the state of Louisiana, we can say a couple things in general. First of all, we have an abundance of water. Our water resources are the envy of most of the states in this country, particularly the states out west who are thirsty. They were allowed through economic development over the years to double and triple in size in terms of population, but they have to transport water great distances in order to satisfy the needs of their population. We in Louisiana have been very blessed to not only have abundant but high quality groundwater resources throughout the state. We also have a tremendous amount of surface water. That surface water is, I think, typified by the major river we have running out past our city here, Mississippi. It drains over 35% of the country. So the question is, whose water is it anyway? Is it ours to use as we wish, or is it a responsibility that we have as caretakers to use what we can for the greater good? We also have to realize that it's not just for the benefit of the citizens of Baton Rouge or the citizens of Louisiana. Most of the activities that we're engaged in on the industrial side have national and international consequences. We provide products and services that are used throughout this nation and throughout our world. That's what improves our quality of life. And as the general pointed out, you know, we need the gas in the car, but we need to keep the emissions in the pipes, okay? We need to improve our environment. We need to minimize our impact on the environment. When we look at water resources, we have the ability now, with far greater technology and with educational and computer modeling, to get a better idea of what we should do. And this is very important for us in Louisiana as well as the state, because water is the new oil. When we look a couple generations from now, water is the power. There are people already in the western half of the country would love to get their hands on our water. but it's not always ours. In industry, we are looking at the water uses we have, and we're examining technology, and we've made a number of reductions. A lot of our industries were able to expand, and in many cases, almost double production without using additional water. That's a challenge. It requires technology, and it requires lots of investment in money. Our citizens demand and need good quality water, but we have to be able to do it at a price that they can afford. We cannot dictate for our public use requirements that are so expensive that people can't afford the solution that we've come up with. So that's why it's very important when we examine our water resources that we recognize the abundance we have. We also have to recognize that there are differences in quality of our water. In some areas, we've been blessed in Baton Rouge to have some of the best water quality in the world. So we didn't even have to treat it coming out of the ground. Other areas, even in this state, have to treat the water. It has mineral content and the other things that make it a problem. Within industry, we have to have clean water to run our industrial processes and to cool our cooling towers and to maintain our lifestyle and maintain our production. So it's very important to us that water and a water policy examine the science, examine the technology, and at the same time really recognize the responsibility we all have to use the water wisely. It's not just to say, well, we're going to make industry change and get off the water so that we can continue to waste the water and not care about what water we use. We all bear that responsibility. We're going to all have to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And next we have a new friend of mine who was recommended by a former DEQ secretary, Martha Madden, Chip Coulter of the the Water Institute of the Gulf. Come on up, Chip.
Thank you, Gene. Having returned a couple of years ago to Louisiana from 7 years in Texas, I really want to emphasize the points that both General Honore and Henry made about the importance of water as a resource in the state. It's probably the most underappreciated resource, but facing what Texas is facing in the capital city area with Lake Travis down 60 feet or so, facing what California is facing right now in the Central Valley with their drought, the ability to have adequate resources depends not only on the blessings of nature, but on the planning and characterization that goes into dealing with the use of those resources. The question is, do you have to have a crisis to motivate you to have a plan, to have a management scheme? And you could argue that many times is what motivates that kind of activity, having a crisis. You could also argue on the other side that if you have a plan that anticipates droughts, anticipates quality crises of one kind or another, then you're better equipped to deal with it. And so I think an important question for Louisiana is, given the value of that resource to us, to our economic development and the attraction it is to future economic development, as well as sustaining the quality of life that we want to have here that's based on water, what should we be doing to plan for the use of and the management of our water resource without going beyond what needs to be done? And while it's not a perfect example, I think you can use the state's Coastal Restoration and Protection Master Plan as a mirror to look at what sorts of things can be done. In that case, there was a crisis. It was recognized that we had a huge land loss problem, that we had, particularly Katrina, Rita, that sequence of storms, we had a protection crisis that needed to be dealt with in an organized sort of way. And so a very comprehensive effort went into planning for dealing with those crises, leaving a plan in place that could be dealt with and actually implemented on a priority basis. What are the most important things to do that would both restore our coast and that would protect our people and our industry and our culture from the ravages of storms and floods? So obviously you can't do it all, and you don't necessarily need to do it all. And I think we can take the same approach to water management. Not every part of the water resource use, allocation, and future sustainability in our state faces real challenges that need management, but some do. And so if we're going to create a management structure, can we in some way focus on those areas that are important? My final point is, how do we know what areas are most important? I think it goes back to having a good understanding of the quantity of our resource to start with. Governor Bush in Texas, at one point in his governorship, had a water resource group come in to talk to him about his state agencies, about the importance of a water resource management plan. And he said, gentlemen, how much fresh water does Texas have? They kind of looked at him and they weren't really sure they knew that. Well, I think you can ask the same question in Louisiana. What is our resource base of surface water and groundwater? Where are we having questions about adequacy of it to meet current and future demands? Do we have enough technical information to underpin a good management scheme oriented at priorities? And so we need an effort to identify what information we need to lead to the planning effort that the Louisiana Water Resources Commission is thinking about doing, so we can in fact prioritize our needs. So coming from an applied science organization, I guess it's not surprising that I would argue that we need to understand the resource, we need to understand the challenges it faces, and that needs to be based on good, solid technical information so we make wise choices. Certainly politics and policies have to enter into those choices, but let's be sure we underpin our decisions based on good, solid information that is either available now, or if it's not, that we make sure we have it in those areas of critical need before we proceed too far down a management platform or path. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. And our last speaker, but not our least, is Hayes Towns Jr., who is the founder of the Baton Rouge Citizens to Save Our Water. Hayes, I believe you can take over here, and you have a slideshow you want to show everybody.
You have a microphone?
Yes, I do, right here.
Basically, everybody's been giving talks on a high plane. Now we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. My job, my goal is to save the drinking water of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, be all grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And right now, as you can tell from the tone of things, it's under threat, under danger. Fall of 2010, I started a study on the Baton Rouge area of drinking water, and quickly discovered that it was not sustainable. Nobody was talking about it. So we started putting pressure on Counsel, and he didn't want to. It took a lot of pressure, finally held a hearing, and then held a hearing in December of 2012, and came out in January of 2013, about a month later, wrote a letter to the Capital Area Groundwater Conservation Commission, asking them to recognize that the two big pumping stations in Baton Rouge being pumped in a non-sustainable manner, and provide a general discussion of management how they could correct this situation, save our water. Well, I went to the next meeting when they brought this up, and the Capital Area Groundwater Commission refused to recognize the first question that it was being pumped in a non-sustainable manner. They said they didn't know what sustainable meant. It was a legal term and it was not in their law, so it wasn't their business. And then they had a general discussion of management actions, which were almost zero, almost none. They weren't doing anything, and it's continued to this day. I'm going to show you a little something that, let's see how to do this. Okay, Capital Area Groundwater Conservation Commission came into being the 1st of January 1975. In 1966, this was a saltwater intrusion coming up the Acadian Thruway, not far from here, headed towards Government Street. In 1977, this is what they saw. 1992, this is in the 2,000-foot sand headed towards the industrial area. This is what they saw. Nobody was even very concerned about this at the time. 2005, this is what they saw. Still weren't concerned about it. In 2012, it's up to Choctaw Drive. I didn't make up these things.
It's cold.
This is from USGS. This is that paper. Mine's from, you can see, I'm sorry. You can see the change. I go to the 1,500-foot sand. In 1966, the salt water, that red area was over 250 milliliters. I'm sorry, parts per million, say the easy way. And that's the minimum drinking standard. And it's coming up to K2 in 1966. They knew this. In 1977, it's up by the Catholic Light Center. These are all published at that time. 1992 is right up to the main, one of the main wells at Government Street. In 2005, it's up to the little pumping station that Mr. Owen talked about. That's in 2005. Again, these are not my figures. That's a USGS figure. And these were published at those times. Well, I'll tell you about the Institute of Management. They recognized back in the 30s that the water, 1 minute. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. Basically, we have a real serious problem. There seems to be no action except a lot of words. The Baton Rouge Water Company has put in a well to save that main pumping station. It's supposed to be good 25 to 50 years. That's not a long time in overall scheme of things. And I ask you to call your legislators, people like that, and ask them to work on saving our water. Thank you very much.
Now, I want to give credit where credit is due, and our timekeeper is our secretary, Stuart Stewart. Would you all give her a round of applause for her doing a good job? Equal time for all. Now, this time, I guess it's time to introduce myself. I'm Gene Armstrong, and I'm president of this organization. I'm also a certified economic developer. On your table, you're going to find index cards. You are asked, if you have a question, to fill out the index card and mark it as a check. On the left, it says that you, it's a con, and if it's on the right, it's a pro, okay? Or yes or no, so that we can keep the questions balanced as they come forward before these gentlemen. And you will have an opportunity to ask them. I'm sorry?
Say that again.
Pro and con. Pro is going to be on the, let's make pro on the left and con on the right. Okay?
Well, what is the topic?
The topic is whatever questions they have to ask, and if you have a specific speaker you want to ask that of, you may identify that person.
Okay,
but-
we need to clarify something. The pro is, should the industry use as much water as 5 parishes in a day? Because that's the situation we got now. That's the pro.
No, with all due respect, I don't think that's the proper way to put it.
Okay, what was you say? That's your job.
I think the pro is, you think, and y'all let me know if you agree with this, you think that actions are being taken to solve this problem that we have in Baton Rouge. And the con is, obviously, you don't think actions are being taken. So does that work a little bit better?
Not really.
I tell you what, you just write the questions, I'll figure it out up here.
Not really. You've been working on it for 30 years and haven't done that.
If you will, and John, once you have your questions written out, if you'll raise your hand, and please understand, these are questions from the audience. This does not represent questions from our organization. Okay, does anyone have a question? I'm sorry? Anybody got a question? Still writing. Okay. Y'all can take a breather for a minute. These are the people that are going to have to work together to resolve this issue along with our legislature. And let me give you a very layman's definition of economic development. I coined it, so I get to claim it. Economic development is the balancing of the needs grieves and resources of a community for the benefit of all. I think water certainly would fit into that scope. Well, this is the first question, and since it's the first one, we're not going to go to pro or con. What is the status of Louisiana political subdivisions selling Louisiana water supplies to out-of-state companies? Who would like to answer that? That would be groundwater conservation. I believe, Tony, that falls to you.
I can,
No, come up here to the, you're going to need to come to the mic.
okay. Okay, I'm going to go back a few years to answer this question. Looked at my bio, you can see I used to work for the Department of Natural Resources. I was in charge of the groundwater program there. And while I was there, there were entities from the state of Texas, even before I was there, that came in wanting to buy water from Louisiana, specifically from Toledo Bend Reservoir. Texas water law is a little bit different than Louisiana. You cannot transport water from one watershed to another in Texas without getting a permit, which means the city of Dallas and Fort Worth, the Metroplex, who is very hurting for water, back then even more so now, cannot go to the Texas side of Toledo Bend Reservoir, and I think you all know where that is, pump water out and send it to Dallas, because that crosses several watersheds. But there was no problem with taking water from the Louisiana side and pumping it up to Lake Tawakoni and then ultimately into Dallas. Well, they didn't come to Department of Transportation and Development or DNR, DEQ. They went to the Department of Economic Development saying, have we got a deal for you? We're going to give you all these billions of dollars for the water on your side of this lake for the next 50 years. And it came out to fractions of a cent per million acre feet of the water. And ultimately, the state, the governor, was Governor Foster at that time, said, you know, this is not a good idea. And it was put in the law that it had to go, it had any out-of-state water sales like that had to have the governor's signature. The Sabine River Authority runs Toledo Bend Reservoir on Louisiana side of the state line. And they were very much for selling the water and taking the money in. But if this answers your question, any sales of water like that out of state has to have the governor's signature now. Bottled water is a different matter. That's interstate commerce, and we do not play into that.
Tony, excuse me, would you clarify, you said it has to take the governor's signature. What process does it take to get the governor's signature? Just, hey, would you sign this? Or does it go through a process?
I believe it has to go through the legislature and, you know, be introduced as a bill for them to be able to sell it. I would have to double check on that and let leaders with vision know. But that's where it stood when I left Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, and we will send the information out to everyone by their email. And now I believe the general has something he wanted to comment on.
Our challenge with water in the state is that water is managed in the Department of Natural Resources. It's the same department that proliferate oil exploration. That's the problem. Department of Natural Resources hold a conference every year, and for all the big oil companies, and treat them to a 5-star hotel in New Orleans to talk about how we're going to exploit the oil, which they should do. We want them to come here and get that oil out the ground, create the jobs, and provide economic development for our nation. The challenge is our water is a second player in the Department of Natural Resources. Our water is being challenged. I'm just here to tell you that we're going to propose legislation this year to move water out of the Department of Natural Resources. Oil and water don't mix. It's for a good reason. because the other issue we have with water in use, Exxon and Georgia Pacific have a right to the water they're using because the state law says you have a right to capture. That's the state law. It was created. It works for industry. But those two companies use nearly as much water as 5 parishes in a given day. And that's the challenge. All we want them to do is use river water like Dow and the other companies. But the Louisiana law has a right of capture. They don't pay for their water. They drill a well. You and I pay for water, right? They don't pay for their water. There's no tax on their water. We want them to use the river water. They say it will hurt them economically. Exxon made $34 billion profit last year. And Georgia Pacific has said, hey, if you make us use river water, we'll take our 1,200 jobs and leave. Well, not here. The only reason they're here is because of the wood. And we got lax environmental standards because the producer stuff they make is toxic and we all need it. But we put up with it. But the current law, Exxon is not breaking the law, Georgia Pacific is not breaking the law. We need to change the law because they need to do like the rest of industry. Draw the water out the river, build technology. We got the engineers at LSU and Southern and Tulane that can do this and create a technical solution and leave the aquifer water for the people and they use the river water. But the law has to change.
If I could clear up one slight point. The general said that the industries do not pay for water. All industry withdrawals regulated in the 5 parish capital area have to pay $5 for every 1,000,000 gallons of water that they withdraw. Okay?
Well, Tony, I just want to point out that everyone in this room has the right to drill a water well and not pay for their water either. The reason we pay Gene Owens for our water is because he went and spent millions and millions of dollars laying pipelines around the city.
That's correct. Well, the $5 a million gallons they pay is to Capital Area Groundwater Conservation District to fund the programs that we run.
Thank you, Ron. There will be paper on the taper in front of you in the future. We appreciate your input. Okay, the next question. With a limited resource like groundwater, how do you prioritize usage between residents and industry? Gene?
This question first came up, and as General Honore says, this is a matter of law, but law makes no distinction between the user of water as to who they may be or even what they may be. So legally, industry and public supply have identical rights to the water, as do, someone pointed out, as do individuals. I think that this came up for a considerable amount of discussions in a public forum, and I believe that the sentiment of the legislation developing the groundwater laws that we currently have gives first priority to public supply, and thereafter industry and agriculture in the form of irrigation have equal rights to public supply. It's so vague that I would suggest that it is not it's never been tested. It's so vague in this statement of the law that I would suggest that it is not apparent as to how that could be enforced or even fully interpreted. But the priority is established by debate in the legislature, and it does give public supply first priority.
Thank you, Gene. Does anyone, oh, sorry, didn't see.
Thank you. We have to be aware of that Louisiana's laws differ. There's a lot of the areas of the eastern side of the United States differ from the areas that have a lot of water, differ from the areas in the west that have a very scarcity of water. In Louisiana, we have a very strong laws dealing with private ownership and citizens' rights and the individual's rights. And in Louisiana, the individual has the right to use the water if he can capture it, the rule of capture. He captures the water, he has the right to use that water for his use and for his family use, or whether it's for his community's use, or whether it's an industry. This industry is a person. We're people too. We have families, we use the water to make products, and we use those products. Now, when you're looking at the water law itself, what he was referring to actually is only during a time of a water emergency, where you had a severe critical area that is declared, does the government say, okay, if we had to ration the water, if we had to cut back, then we naturally are going to say this is the first priority, this is the second priority. But in reality, in most of the areas of the state, we have not had to do that. We've only got a few areas in North Louisiana that we've actually had to declare a critical area, and it was because of overpumping in one area and the lack of a available surface water alternative. So keep in mind that the Louisiana has very strong protections for individual rights and landowners. And so when you start saying, no, we're going to make the government decide winners and losers, we're going to let the government say this commercial enterprise gets the water and this one does not. Because what is public supply? It doesn't just include the water you drink. It includes the water you use to wash your car, to water your lawn, the guy down the street and his car wash or whatever other businesses. And so sometimes when you're looking at prioritizing, is it important for you to have gasoline in your car to go down the street? Some people would say energy is a very important thing, especially when the lights go out, especially in the summertime when you need that air conditioning, you really want to use it. So for power generation, that may be an important priority to you, more important than watering your lawn. So there are some differences that you have to look at. We've looked at that. I was served, and several of his folks here have served on the Water Resources Study Commission back in 1983, again in 1999, and it was a progression thing. We learned a lot, but unfortunately, it took a drought to get people to start talking. And then when the drought was over, the talking stopped. Okay? The second time around in 99, we took the next step. We actually formed a groundwater resources management commission. And they did studies and they examined it. And the state of Louisiana has differences. In the southwest Louisiana, it's agriculture that's the primary water user. Okay? When you go up to North Louisiana, there's not as much of that. It may be for wood products production, or it may have some municipal, but they have some limited uses. In this area, the general is correct. The majority of our industries use surface water. They use the Mississippi River. They spend a lot of money to remove the minerals content so that they can use it in industrial processes. But keep in mind, there are some businesses that have been here a very long time, and they were here long before a lot of the population was the kind of population we have here. And they used the best resource they had at the time, which was groundwater. It was plentiful, it was in good quality, and they have used it. Now, as we've moved forward, some of these industries have had to realize that we've got to restrict it, we've got to reduce it, we've got to go to other sources. But that takes time, because you're talking about millions of dollars in investment to change the structure. Just like if I say today, Today, you know, 80% of your water use in your home, you're not even using to drink.
Okay.
You're flushing it down a toilet. So we could ask people,
If you
why
got
don't
the
you
lobby
put two
speaker,
different
I'm
water
leaving.
systems in your house? But we don't, because it costs too much money.
Okay, we're
Well,
going to
you're a
have to
good
move.
lobbyist. You do a great job.
Okay, let's do something. Let's put a minute on the responses from this point on. Hayes,
Well, the first thing I was going to say, I'll be brief. Basically, the Louisiana State Constitution puts the people first with our natural resources. It's very clear and doesn't make any bones. It charges the legislature and the state government to protect these natural resources for the long term for the people. Now, we would really be doing the wrong thing if we sit back and say that we're running one of the best natural resources in the country, the drinking water we have in Baton Rouge. We don't deserve to have our children and grandchildren drinking Mississippi River water because we didn't take advantage of the situation. Basically, that's it. And another thing, just in jest, we really don't need an attorney to tell us corporations are people too.
we have to limit these answers because we have a huge list of questions here, and we do want to give everyone a chance to have their question answered. The next question is stated, from and including St. John Parish South, water is drawn from the Mississippi River. Why can't industry use the river the same way industry does south of Baton Rouge does? Okay, Henry, this is your shot.
What would you like? 1 minute of what?
1 minute. And the question is, why can't you use river water?
Some processes can and will use river water. Depends on what your use of the water is for. If you're trying to make a high quality paper and everybody wants white paper, they don't want kind of gray, kind of green, kind of other colored paper, then you need a quality of water to produce that paper. And if you're whether you're a paper mill or something else, then that's a certain quality. If you're making high pressure steam, it's very important that the mineral content of that be within acceptable ranges so that you can produce that steam and run that energy to run your processes. Some companies have employed different processes. Some of those companies came along much later, came along in the last 20 or 30 years. They did not have groundwater as a resource. And keep in mind, 1/3 of the state's population drinks water from the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is as clean as it's ever been. Okay? It's cleaner now than it was 100 years ago. So keep in mind that we can't just say it's our water, because it's not.
Thank you. Hayes, you want to respond to that? I said, please, 1 minute, because I said the list keeps coming.
Clean.
Basically, Shell Chemical, Dow Chemical, Texaco, they all use river water. So we're not asking industries north of Baton Rouge that have fresh water to do things that other people are not doing. It's not an impossible situation. Henry's right, they were here a long time ago, and it was only natural that they use this wonderful water. But now we've come to realize that there's a limit on this wonderful water. Your water has an expiration date, and it's getting closer and closer.
Okay, this looks like a good follow-up question to what was just asked. How much of our fresh water comes from other states, such as Mississippi, and what limits might be placed on that in the future, and on that access in the future? Gene?
Fresh water.
Gene? No, I need him here for the camera.
First of all, I understand the question to be how much of our fresh water comes from other states, meaning groundwater. If that's not the question, then I'm about to answer the wrong question. But, and the answer is that the the aquifers from which we draw almost all of the groundwater and all of the deep groundwater outcrop in the Homachita forest, just up near between Woodville and Centerville, and just north of that. And so I guess that over the long haul, all of the water that you're using comes from the other states, in the sense that that's the outcropping, that's the recharge source for water. I will caution you that that cycle is a very long cycle. In fact, the cycle is so long that the water that you have on your table today fell as rain between Vicksburg and Natchez, or down in the Homachita forest, about the time of Christ.
I'm sorry, I gotta stop standing behind this thing.
Y'all pay attention to me.
Well, there's an expiration date on our water, believe it or not. We got hundreds of injection wells going in Louisiana that are putting waste from Alabama inside Louisiana, because Louisiana law says injection well stuff from oil wells is not hazardous. But you can't drink it, you can't give it to the cows, you can't give it to the pigs. Now, you can put that in the ground. What do you think is going? The Congress and the legislature of Louisiana said, well, we have unconclusive evidence if you put poison in the ground that it will not affect the aquifers. Now, you believe that. We got to have better water laws. We've been blessed with natural resources. We want to harness those resources. We got to protect our water. There's an expiration date on water. Now, I got to go outside and take a conference call, but on 8 March, write this date down, we're having a water festival at the Capitol, because our message to the Louisiana legislature is we got to do something about our water. There's an expiration date on it. So please show up on 8 March at the Capitol, be from about 1 to 3, few speeches, and be able to go home.
All
Let
right,
me make one quick follow-up. Let me make one quick follow-up on water going between states. For the last couple of decades, I guess it's been, in North Mississippi, DeSoto County, there's an aquifer. It's part of the Sparta Aquifer in Louisiana, if you've heard of that one, but over on that side of the river, it's called the Memphis Aquifer. Okay, well, we all know that Memphis is just across the state line in Mississippi. Well, DeSoto County sued Memphis Power and Light over the amount of water that they were drawing out of the aquifer for the citizens of Memphis. I don't think there's ever been any resolution of that situation. So we're a little bit fortunate here. We don't hear about Mississippi suing us for drawing water out of the Southern Hills Aquifer. So
They shut us off.
yeah, no, because it's all open space up in the forest. When the rain falls, it helps to replenish the aquifer in Baton Rouge.
thank you. Now, I've got a yes or no question. Let's handle this very quickly with a show of hands. Well, that's not going to work either. How safe is bottled water? Now, we've heard the pros and cons on this for a long time, and frankly, I don't think personally, and this is personal opinion, I don't think it comes any finer than Baton Rouge water. Eugene, you want to handle that one? Come up here.
I'll have to generalize, but I'll answer it this way. We've done laboratory tests on, in the first place, I'll answer it this way. The water is safe from bottled water. It won't match Baton Rouge Water Company, and we've done laboratory tests in which we do plate counts of miscellaneous bacteria, not necessarily harmful bacteria, but just miscellaneous bacteria. The plate counts of the miscellaneous bacteria in a typical jug or jar of bottled water pulled off the shelf in your grocery store has many times the plate count for bacteria of water as it comes out of your faucet.
Thank you. Now, this is for everybody on the panel. Does anyone know the outcome of the task force created by the legislature in 2001, comprised of representatives from agriculture, industry, and other shareholders charged with developing a comprehensive statewide water policy? I mean, that's what we're here to ask today.
These people know a lot more about it than I do, but I do know this. The state of Louisiana does not have a comprehensive water plan. As a couple of years ago, they were one of 5 states that didn't have one. They still don't have one. The other 4 states are working on it.
The 2001 legislation was a groundwater management legislation at that time. It did not include surface water, and so a groundwater plan was developed by DNR and with the help of a number of consultants and the USGS with studies. It's only in about 2009 or so that authority was expanded to include both groundwater and surface water. The DNR is currently in the process of developing a water management plan to include both groundwater and surface water.
Thank you. Next question. What is the status of the USGS study of the 2000 aquifer that began in 2007? Okay. Tony?
Okay, that study was one of the ones I alluded to in my presentation. The USGS has finished that study and developed a computer model, and it shows saltwater movement through 2047 under various scenarios in the 2,000-foot sand. And if you go to our website, which is www.cagwcc, you'll find a link to that report. And you can look through it, and there are a number of maps that show what happens with the salt water through 2047, as I said. If anybody has a question about anything specific, I could answer it during my next minute. Okay. Question is, what is the volume percentage of water industry versus Baton Rouge citizens? Now forecast. Okay. We regulate public supply and industrial wells at the Capital Area Groundwater Conservation District. We don't regulate agriculture. We don't regulate domestic wells. The percentage between industry and, we'll call it public supply, but as was stated earlier, public supply is not necessarily what comes out of your tap in the house. It's about 50-50. Sometimes it goes up 52-48, one way or the other. Through 2012, which is when we have our last full year of pumpage data, it's about 53-47 public supply over industry.
Stay put. I have one last question that only you can answer. Is your job civil service or appointed? And if appointed, by whom and what is your term?
Okay. That's a good one. I retired from the state of Louisiana. No, let's go back. I retired from Department of Natural Resources in 2011. I was offered the job as director of the Capital Area Groundwater Conservation District at that time. It is a state agency, so I am considered a state employee. I am unclassified, which means I guess I am not afforded the protections that every other rank and file state employee would be afforded. Not appointed by anyone, was picked by a vote of the commission and offered the job. And I'm there until they decide they need someone different.
Thank you. All right, let's go to something here. Is there This is to anyone. Is there any consideration or plans to inject surface water into the aquifer? Australia is doing that now.
Okay. Okay, I assume we mean in Baton Rouge. No, there are no plans. When I was working in North Louisiana, in the Sparta, they're having problems up there too with water withdrawals. A gentleman who was a retired petroleum engineer sent to the Office of Conservation Underground Injection Control Division a permit to pump fresh water down into the Sparta aquifer, which is the aquifer up there, into a zone that was high in iron. And he was going to pump nice, fresh, clean, potable water down into it and then see if he could let it sit for a while and then recover that fresh water. Well, some of the people up there found out, and I may go over a minute with this, and got in touch with Department of Health and Hospitals. Well, they wound up sending a letter to Senator John Breaux being against it. So it's something that depends on where you are as to how much it's accepted. I know out west, it's done.
Minutes.
Okay.
Senator Breaux hasn't been senator for a while, so that's been a long time. Okay.
Shows how
Now,
far
Chip, I have one for you. How will fracking affect our water supply? You're the scientist of the group.
I think what they've shown so far is that the hydraulic fracturing itself at those depths in those kinds of waters that are not potable or usable has not had effects on fresh water, drinking water, or industrial use water that comes from aquifers considerably up. Usually those kinds of operations happen at 10, 12, 7, 8,000 feet, and our water comes from much shallower depths. However, there have been problems with some of the waters that are used in the process. If they've been spilled, if they haven't been disposed of properly in injection wells, they have gotten into surface water and drinking water supplies that come from underground. So while fracking itself isn't a villain, some of the processes surrounded with the fracturing process have caused problems. And there's a lot of work going on in a lot of states right now to sort that out and to do a better job of regulating those waters as they're used and as they're recycled and as they're disposed of.
Anybody else have a comment?
1
1
minute.
minute.
This will be quick. This will be quick. Another major concern with fracking is the amount of water that it takes to frack a well. And it's 5 million gallons, up to 5 million gallons a job. And they may frack a well 6 times before they're finished. And then they have to dispose of that water. And that's very hard to get permits to dispose of it. They do. There are commercial facilities that'll take those waters and dispose of them. And a lot of the companies are not very forthcoming with what goes into the mixture that they send down. It's mostly sand and water, but then there are some proprietary chemicals that are put in it to help the sand prop open the fissures once they do the frack job. So that's something that we're concerned about because they're starting to do some fracking up just around the state line in East and West Feliciana parishes.
Thank you. Our next question is stated. I live in North Baton Rouge behind Southern University. There is a sewage plant on Avenue K, and there is construction going on. Please explain the condition of the water in this area. Eugene?
By this question, I assume you mean drinking water or water supplied by the Baton Rouge Water Company. And I would say it's totally and absolutely unaffected or nor within any physical means do I see how it could be affected. So I think it's a non-event.
Okay. Question. Is the science and technology available to increase industrial regulations on water use, or do we need stricter regulations to push science and technology research? I think that would fall under the Water Institute. Chip?
Not exactly, but I'll take a shot at it. There's always a question of whether need and regulations drive technologies, and that certainly does happen when tougher regulations are passed and industries or individuals have to find ways to comply. They often resort to technology as the most effective way to do it. On the other hand, it works the other way too. When technologies are developed, say renewable energy, for example, there tends to be a motion to say, well, we ought to do more of this because it has certain properties. So I don't think it's an either-or situation. I think it depends on what the issue is and what the opportunity is, what drives what, but certainly it can work in both directions.
Now, this is a follow-up. I know it came up last, but it's a follow-up. In fact, we've all laughed about it. Remember the garbage barge that my friend Martha Madness turned around and sent back to New York? Well, what is the status of the used fracking water that's being shipped to Louisiana? And Tony, that is your question.
I can ask some backup here, but I don't think Louisiana is allowing out-of-state companies to bring the fracking fluids into the state for disposal. Now, I haven't been there for 3 years. There is Department of Natural Resources.
This was breaking news that is coming down now.
Oh,
it's on
is it?
fracking water barges. In fact, the question was, where's Martha when we need her?
Okay, but is it coming down for disposal in Louisiana?
Yes.
I do not know. I'll have to look
Yeah.
into that.
Research it and get back to us. Hey,
Well, the general had to leave, so I'll say this in his behalf, and my behalf, and y'all's behalf. We don't need other states fracking water. We don't need to use oil field waste. We don't need products that don't fit into our natural environment. And I don't believe, when they tried to send the atomic waste down to Louisiana, they stopped it. So we need to stop this too.
okay, next question. The coastal protection and restoration projects per coastal master plan require a tremendous amount of fresh water. Who, what, and how is this being addressed? Chip? You're getting to be a frequent flyer up here.
That is one of the things that the Water Institute is involved in, because there is a requirement that when you talk about freshwater diversions and freshwater and sediment diversions, you are taking water out of the Mississippi River and you're putting it over the banks and into the wetlands. So how much of that water are you taking, and what impact will that have on channel depth, which affects navigation, on the sandbars in the river, which affects navigation? So it's not only a water issue, it's a structure of the river bottom itself. And so we are being asked, or there is a requirement that as these projects are developed and designed, that they provide answers to those questions, the consumptive use of fresh water as well as the diverted use of fresh water. So there aren't any diversions built yet, it's still in the planning processes, but that information is being developed.
The next question is, what about heavy metals in different wells in the Baton Rouge area?
In the state of Louisiana, all the wells that are used for potable water production are tested annually for a wide variety of things, including all the heavy metals. There are no heavy metals of any significance in the drinking water or the raw water here in Baton Rouge. Now, there is one metal that is of significance, and it does occur in the Mississippi River alluvial water production, And for some reason, the alluvial sands in the Mississippi contain a large amount of arsenic, which has in some cases been dissolved. We don't produce from the alluvial aquifer, but the alluvial aquifers in the Mississippi floodplain do produce water which is higher in general than the current 30 parts per billion of arsenic.
Okay. Did you have anything to say? Okay. All right. To anyone on the panel, is there a provable cause and effect relationship between industrial use of Baton Rouge groundwater and industrial of salt water? Not sure I
I'll
understand.
take this first.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on this. Mr. Duplechin and the other appointed people are as well. Hayes had done a lot of work on it. But if Hayes had a time, he should go through and show you the model that the more they draw from the 1,500 and 2,000 foot sands. Now look, I'm not enemies with Exxon. Vice President Exxon lived 2 houses down, okay, from me, and we met for an hour and a half a week ago to talk about this, because I told him, I said, look, he said, well, you know, we can't end up in court over this. Because I said, well, yeah, we can, but you got more lawyers than I do, and you'll win. But I'll tell you what, if you don't come off the aquifer water, I'm going to put 2,000 grandmothers at your front gate. We will not win in court, because court, the law is, he's got a right to it. You with me? But if I bring 2,000 grandmothers and we stand at your front gate every day, we think we can get you. I don't know if we'll get, and they're in our court. This is a good company. They've done well for this town. They're not the enemy. But they have to answer the corporate bosses, and they have to work on a profit margin. But the company made $34 billion profit last year, and we just want them to use river water. Then once we get them, we'll go do Georgia Pacific next.
Okay, I have a question for Graham. Henry, why can't industry, or won't, or doesn't it, use river water instead of aquifer water?
Hopefully, I thought I'd explained that there are some companies who were using groundwater before they developed some of the later technologies for extracting all the minerals that were in the Mississippi River at that time. Those water, they then built a distribution system. And if you've got a refinery that's 100 years old, or a pulp and paper plant that's 60 or 70 years old, your water distribution system is to use both from one source. So what you would have to do is similar to what you would have to do in your house. If you were told, only use this nice groundwater for your drinking supply and use other water for everything else. You would have to go back in your house, put 2 sets of pipes for everything, to everywhere, so that you can use gray water for the things and save. That's not what we're asking people to do, but in a sense, that's what you would have to do in some of these industrial ones that already have the infrastructure in place. They would have to completely change out what they have.
Don't go far. Follow-up question. Companies are granted 10-year tax exemptions. They're constantly renewing their plants. In earning these 10-year tax exemptions, like you said, this technology is old. Are we actually supporting old technology by giving them tax exemption and letting them use groundwater?
Well, one of the problems that we have when you have too many regulations sometimes is you entrench what you're doing now. Because to do something different, you now have a separate set of rules that you have to apply. If you are using groundwater right now and you want to switch to surface water, now you have to come under as a new source to the water, drinking water, the water intake regulations that are now in place by EPA, and more stringent ones are being proposed. So you become a new source and have to meet a different standard. If you go from what you have now, where you have clean water, no minerals in it, to going to a cooling tower system where you have minerals, you will have air emissions. And then the folks in your neighborhood will go, well, wait a minute, why you now have air emissions? Well, because I had to put this extra process in that I didn't have to put in before. And I will have to meet the air requirements. So there are a number of consequences when you change a technology that has been proven and accepted to one that may be different. It will require some different technology, and it will require a different investment.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, yes.
I just saw you.
Again, the challenge we got, we're trying to find a progressive way out of this. You know, as I said, when I talked with the vice president of Exxon and did a conference call with him last Monday, the law is on their side. It's an option for them. It's money. Exxon is putting $5 billion into the Gulf this year. That's the investment they're putting in the Gulf. That's money they're taking from their profits and from their stakeholders. They're putting in developing the Gulf. This is just a little piece of it to convert to the river water and preserve the water for the city of Baton Rouge. They use about 22 billion a day. Georgia Pacific is what, about 40 billion a day, gallons a day, and that combined equals to what the 5 parishes use. So all we want is to negotiate it, earn your tax credit. If you want the tax credit to be put toward improving your technology, let's do that. They get money for everything else. So let's give them some more money to convert them off the aquifer, because once we go to river water, we ain't coming back. Let's fix it that way. Let's negotiate with them.
Okay, the next question is to Eugene Owens. What will be the cost? What will the cost be for the scavenger wells? And will that cost be passed on solely to the residential users?
We have approximately $4 million invested in the pair of scavenger wells. And that investment is cash investment. It will be added as part of the rate base, and all users of the water, including the residential payers as well as any commercial establishments, will pay their pro rata portion to enable us to recover that investment.
Okay, this is a question to Hayes Towns. Why, since there is a law or state constitution that allows business, the state government to require a business, in this case Exxon and Georgia Pacific, to stop using from aquifers, and two companies move all other means? Did you get the question? In short, why is Exxon and GP, why are they grandfathered in and not subject to all the rest of the rules? I think, did I have that question? Whoever asked the question, is that, did I interpret it correctly?
Not exactly.
Could you explain your question? Because I'm sorry, I couldn't read all of it.
At that first water meeting, you were there, and there was all kind of experts there, and this attorney explained to the commission, that's 21 of them, that there's already a law on the books that allows the state government to cause them to stop doing this if they are damaging a lot of citizens. And that was the gist of the law. And this, he certainly acted like he knew what he was talking about. And this was over a year ago, and I thought surely someone would have enough strength to make a move in that direction. You might remember
Well,
that, Dave. You were there.
there is a law that allows the Commission of Conservation to take action to preserve the aquifer. However, getting the Commission of Conservation, which is a state position, to do this work is near to impossible. And that's the only way I know. The law is there if he chose to use it. He has not chosen to use it.
We'll start you on 30
I'm going to
seconds.
stay over here. In 2001, when the state passed the state groundwater management law, they came up with a term called critical groundwater areas. And the Sparta Aquifer up in North Louisiana, which serves some or all of 16 parishes, sent in an application to have the entire aquifer declared critical. Well, the powers that be didn't like that word, and the powers that be are in that 34-story building downtown with UEP Long out in the front. They didn't like the word critical. They said that was going to keep industry away and stifle in economic development. So they changed the term to area of groundwater concern. And there were 3 areas of groundwater concern declared up in North Louisiana. 4 townships around Monroe, 4 townships around Ruston, and 4 townships around Jonesboro Hodge. So it's not impossible to get it done, but someone has to actually turn in an application, not just ask.
As many of you know, oh, Towns, okay, I'm sorry.
We worked with the Commissioner of Conservation to hold a hearing to declare this an area of concern. He finally did have a hearing after 2 years, and the city parish wrote him a resolution asking him to do it. The Ascension Parish wrote him a resolution asking him to do it. The local legislative officers sent him a letter and asked him to do it. And finally had the newspaper ask him to do it, and that's when he did it. So he held a hearing and came up, and his solution was to ask the Capital Area Groundwater Commission to propose actions. They hadn't proposed any actions. We've proved that what we were saying was right by their own reports, but no serious action is taken to protect the water.
You have the right to respond. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, real quick. Everyone saw Mr. Towns' graphics of the saltwater movement in the Baton Rouge area, the 2,000-foot sand and the 1,500-foot sand. And I hate to pick on people, but do y'all know where that water in the 1,500-foot sand is going? That's salt water? Do you know what industry is driving that? No industry. It's Baton Rouge Water Company. And they're taking their own steps to alleviate that. Okay? Capital Area Groundwater has been part of that. We helped sponsor a study by Dr. Frank Sy out at LSU to look into where and how big of wells to put in. Steps are being taken, and I know Hayes doesn't like it when I say this, but this didn't happen yesterday, and we're not going to solve it tomorrow. You look at the coast, and Dr. Groat will, I still have 9 seconds, will stand behind me. You know, they've been working on it, and I'd like to talk with you about some of the diversions that y'all are working on later.
Yeah, the great thing about a democracy, we can have difference of opinions. I'm glad to see the state is starting the water center. But the day that the governor announced the water center, which was a big smile in my heart, that same day an AP article came out that said the Coast Guard had approved for barges to bring fracking water here from Alabama and Pennsylvania. So on one hand, we establishing a world-class water center, and on the other hand, we're letting industrial waste come from other states. Now you can tell me what you want. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, but if you put poison in the ground, it's gonna come up somewhere. And the state laws allow industry to bring toxic waste and dump it in old wells here in the state of Louisiana. Nobody can tell me, common sense wise, that that's not going to come up and show up somewhere in our food and water supply. That's why we got to separate water from DNR, and we got to have a Department of Water for the state of Louisiana.
Mr. Owen, Gene, it's your turn again. I see pipelines being installed in Sorrento by your company at a rapid clip, as well as other areas in Lower Ascension Parish. Should water be taken from Baton Rouge industry so you can sell it well outside of East Baton Rouge Parish?
We do, excuse me, we do serve Ascension Parish, the unincorporated areas of Ascension Parish, and although Sorrento is incorporated, we do serve the city of Sorrento itself. We, as far as the question as to the proper delivery of water to Ascension Parish as opposed to anybody living in East Baton Rouge Parish, I'll put it this way. About 1/3 of our customers in East Baton Rouge Parish also reside below the fault, and 2/3 of those are north of the fault on the freshwater side. So I think that it's not beyond the realm of reason to say that the people that reside below the fault in East Baton Rouge Parish have the same right as anybody else, and I believe that the people in Ascension Parish have the same right to access that good water as we do north of the fault. And incidentally, we are about 100 yards from the fault right here in this restaurant today. We're north, though.
That sounds like a discussion that happens all the time between North and South California. The next question, and I find this extremely interesting, since many of us know who've tried to find ways to deal with our wetlands, that there's been contemplated diverting the water out into the wetlands to replenish America's wetlands, which is the treasure house of the entire United States. And this is why this question is so interesting. Are states north of Louisiana looking to divert Mississippi River water for themselves? What if they do it to us? Who wants to take this one?
Dr. Groat, you want to go at that first?
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, the good news is we got levees. 1912, 1937, 1927, 1937. In 2011, and Katrina reaffirmed why we need to have the levees. The downside of the levees is the fact that what used to happen, the reason our soil is so rich up in Point Capee Parish is that it flooded about 3 times during recorded history. And that great alluvial soil out of the Mississippi River created this great place where we live. When we put that levee in, my family up in Point Capee moved twice out of the way of the floods, and where we created the Atchafalaya Basin and the Atchafalaya or spillway. The fact we got levees is a good thing. We probably wouldn't have most of Baton Rouge now if we didn't have levees. None of New Orleans. But again, when we extended those levees through Plaquemine Parish, that prevented the water from the Mississippi River from overflowing. When it didn't overflow, you don't get the sediments. That's the problem. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Okay. Chip? He was just making up for while he was out of the room.
Everything he said is right. I mean, the nourishment of the wetlands does depend on floodwaters getting into the wetlands with the sediment it carries. The diversion structures are intended to create engineered structures through those levees that protect us so that we can get the water over there without removing the protection that the levees provide. And the question asked about are people upstate, upriver in other states taking water out of the river for similar purposes? That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I think our big issue with what the people up the river are doing is what they're putting into the river, the nutrients, the fertilizer runoff that may create some problems with the water we put in the wetlands down at our end of the river. And we're doing a lot of work right now to figure out whether that is in fact something we ought to be concerned about, because it's certainly a factor that has to be dealt with.
Now, this is the final question, and it's a beauty. And it's for each and every one of you. Panel members, you are young at heart as a group, but are there young people in your areas that will replace you, ready to take on the new challenges of supplying fresh water, drinkable, potable water for the future? Let's start with Hayes. Let's get started on his side this time, and just one by one come on up and answer.
Well, mine is a simple answer. I didn't get involved in other people's problems until I'd gotten older. I think those young people are there to take my place when I quit.
Chip, you're next.
As a geologist and someone who has worked in water off and on throughout my career, I think we look behind us in the university systems, LSU here and other universities around the country, and Tony, I think you've seen this in DNR and USGS. There are people who see water, particularly groundwater, as a challenge that has a lot of opportunities for creative work, and I think it does stimulate people. And I think Louisiana has some folks at LSU, Tulane, and other places, Louisiana Tech, who deal with this issue, and I think that's not a question of whether there are people behind us, it's a question of whether we're really willing to listen to them as we make our decisions.
Henry?
I'm very encouraged by the number of people who are now working in environmental and programs, scientists, engineers, biologists, and I do believe that we have a future generation who is more aware of the need and importance of water and willing to examine what it takes, both from a practical standpoint and a technology to improve it. So I am encouraged because I see a lot of interest. I've given talks to a number of groups at LSU and other universities, and I see that there are a lot of people that are still interested in protecting our environment.
You know, I'm really shy at heart. I've spent a lot of time teaching youngsters, and I'm so glad to see that DNR has this WaterWise in Baton Rouge program going, and they're trying to make inroads into the schools in Baton Rouge. I've been up in North Louisiana working with the people that oversee the SPARTA. There's the SPARTA Groundwater Commission, and they hold several festivals through the year for fifth graders. And I've gotten up and talked to the kids about the importance of water. We do it in different stations. And one thing I'll do is put a gallon jug of water from Walmart on the table and ask them, how many of y'all go camping? All hands go up. It says, y'all use this much water to brush your teeth? And they'd say no. And said, well, if you brush your teeth for 3 minutes, let the faucet run, then you're using 9 times that amount of water. And that it's important to get to the young kids and put the seeds in their mind, and maybe some of them will remember it as they go through. And once they get to college or so forth, get out and want to do that. Thank you.
I'm greatly encouraged because what I see coming behind me are more intelligent engineers and business leaders that will not hesitate to question the status quo and why it should not be improved. And my concern is that we give them room and let them do their thing, because I tell you, there's a great crop behind me that is ready, willing, and able to supply us with these answers.
General?
Well, there's an expiration date on our drinking water. Our next wars will be about water, not about oil. That being said, we must act decisively to trade and make sure to have an appreciation of this scarce resource that you can't replenish. And we need to create technologies that take industry off water and the requirement for water. We got less drinking water today than we had yesterday. We have less tomorrow when we get up. This is a deplenishing commodity. No generation has the right to destroy the water that next generations will depend on. And when you put chemicals in the water, you end up with an 800 square mile dead zone in the Gulf. I'm telling you, we got to do something. Do it now.
And since I'm fortunate that I get to have the last word, I would say it all starts with you. You cared enough to come here and get the facts. Take them to your neighborhoods, adopt your neighborhood school, coordinate. If you have any question or you would like any of these people to contact them to see if they'd be willing to come and talk to your schools, call us. Come get involved with us. We're about the future. And thank you for coming, and don't forget, next month it's on Tuesday the 18th, and it's going to be on pension plans.